Welcome to another episode of Mr. Plumb's Thoughts. Every once in a while I'll get somebody who asks me this question. Usually with that raised eyebrow look, right? Like, you don't actually believe the Bible literally, do you? And I always chuckle because the way they ask it tells me that they think they've trapped me, right? But I'll just smile and say, yeah, I do. I believe the Bible literally. Because if I stop believing the Bible literally, then I stop believing in God. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand why people ask. I mean, the Bible's full of things that defy, everything we know about science, right? You've got a sea that parts, a donkey that talks, a man that walks on water, multiple men that walk on water, really, people that come back from the dead. We've spent centuries, or millennia really, cataloging the laws of nature and of science, and then along comes this book called the Bible that basically says, yeah, well, God bent that rule, and that one and that one too. So naturally people think, well, that can't be literal, right? But here's the thing, that's exactly why I do take it literally. Because the entire point of a miracle is that it's impossible for us to do and proves the omnipotence of God. Now, God is a God of law, and everything he's ever made operates according to law. There's no randomness in him. Planets orbit where he placed them exactly as he commanded them. Light moves exactly how he decreed it should move. Even chaos, even entropy, fits inside a system of order he designed. But God is also the lawgiver, and the lawgiver can stop at any moment and just say, whoa, pause, hold on, we're going to do something different today. That, in my opinion, that doesn't make him inconsistent. It makes him sovereign. It makes him God, right? That's what a king can do. The king is the one who creates the laws and follows the laws as well, but every now and then the king has to bend a law for a greater purpose. And we actually see this pattern all through Scripture. God gives a law, and then every once in a while he gives an exception to the law to teach us something higher. Take Nephi, for example. God's commandment was clear: thou shalt not kill. And yet one night Nephi finds himself standing over a drunk Laban with the spirit whispering, the Lord has delivered him into your hands. And Nephi struggles with that. And who wouldn't, right? Because the command is, thou shalt not kill. But then the Spirit explains why. It's better that one man should perish than an entire nation dwindle in unbelief. And in doing so, God taught Nephi how to be like God and under what circumstances it would be justified as a God to end one of your subjects' lives. See, God didn't throw away the law. He simply overrode it for a moment to accomplish a greater purpose. And afterward, the commandment still stood, right? It wasn't like he commanded Nephi to kill and now anyone can kill. That's not how it works, right? And this is how divine law works. The laws are good, but the lawgiver remains supreme. He's not bound to the system. The system is bound by him. So it becomes imperative that the lawgiver is righteous and just, which, of course, we believe God to be. Obviously, there's some people that don't believe God is righteous and just, and I would say that those people, the reason they believe that is because they don't have a solid foundation in God's character. And if they truly understood God's character, they would see things differently. Now, what's true in moral law is also true in physical law. All matter obeys laws of nature. That's the norm. That's how God made it. But every so often, he commands an exception. And when he does, nature obeys just as readily as Nephi did. Probably more readily, right? Nephi at least questioned it, but nature doesn't. Whatever God commands, nature simply obeys. And that's what a miracle really is. It's not science we don't understand yet, like some people say. It's not just some fancy quantum event we'll figure out someday. It's when the universe itself hears the voice of the Maker and says, I, Lord. Think about the Red Sea. Moses didn't stand there trying to calculate the tide. He didn't run experiments to measure wind velocity and come up with the right way to divide this sea. He just stretched out his hand, stretched out his rod, I guess, and God commanded the waters to divide, and the waters pulled back like curtains on a stage. That's not normal. It's not physics. There's nothing that can explain that. That's pure elemental obedience. God just commanded it to happen, and the elements said, okay. Or take, what about Joshua's long day when the sun stood still? The creator of the sun and the earth simply said, stay still. And everything in creation listened. It was as simple as that. There was, no fancy mechanism. We can't explain it with any kind of celestial events or anything like that. It just simply happened because it was commanded. End of story. What about Christ walking on water? That wasn't a balancing act. It wasn't some kind of special training. That was literally the master of elements walking where only he could walk, because the surface recognized his authority. You've got Lazarus. He was dead for 4 days, wrapped up and sealed in a tomb. And, all Christ had to say was, Lazarus, come forth. And life, real physical life obeyed. The atoms realigned and the cells reignited and the spirit was returned. And, the man Lazarus walked out. It was just simple as that. Now, here's where a lot of people, I think, trip. They'll say, well, maybe there is a scientific explanation. We just don't know it yet, right? We need to learn a little bit more. And sure, sometimes God uses natural forces. He sends a wind. He uses storms. He manipulates light. But other times he doesn't use nature. He just commands it. And sometimes I would argue there's even a combination of natural and unexplainable. I think that is probably the case with Noah's flood. The rains came down from above, which can be easily explained by cosmological stuff, such as, maybe a comet that had melted off a whole bunch of water in the path of the Earth. As the Earth, orbits through that water, it ends up raining down. But the fountains of the deep are a different story. They erupted all their water out, and there doesn't seem to be any plausible scientific explanation. I think it's possible God simply commanded the planet to contract, and it did, squeezing all that water from underground reservoirs out, which is believable if you believe the planet is a living creature. If you just think that it's a lifeless rock, it might be a little bit harder to accept that it can just be commanded to do things. Either way, miracles aren't just hidden science. They're literal violations of the norm. They're deliberate exceptions to remind us that law exists because of the lawgiver, not the other way around. And honestly, that's what proves he's God to me. If everything he did could be explained by physics, then he'd be just another mad scientist with really advanced tech. But when he steps in and overrides the very code of existence, that's divinity, and that's God. So let's be clear about this. Believing in miracles doesn't mean rejecting reason, though, right? It means recognizing where reason stops and divine authority begins. It means understanding that science describes how things usually happen, but of course God decides whether they will happen. All of creation runs basically like a perfect orchestra. Following the score he wrote at the beginning of time, every law of motion, every constant, even the law of thermodynamics, they're all part of this grand score. They're part of the sheet music. And, a miracle is basically when the conductor lifts his hands and says, all right, everyone, hold on, hold that note, right? For just a moment, he changes the tempo. And then at the perfect moment, he lets the music play on. And that's why the Bible reads like it does. These aren't fairy tales. They're moments when heaven stepped in and said, watch this. Moments when faith collided with matter and matter obeyed and moved. And honestly, if we start trying to explain every miracle away, we miss the message. because each miracle is a testimony of obedience. Not just human obedience, but cosmic obedience. Even the elements themselves keep their covenants. So it's just truly fascinating when you kind of see these things, from further away. I believe the Bible is literal. I believe every word of it. I believe a sea really parted. I believe a donkey really spoke. I believe Christ and Peter really walked on water. And, I believe the dead really rose. I believe all of these things. Because if those things didn't literally happen, then what's left of faith? Faith then would become a metaphor, and God would become an idea. But he's not an idea. He's a being. He's a real being who commands the stars and every element beneath. When he speaks, light exists. When he whispers, atoms align. And when he commands, every molecule of the universe says, "Yes, Lord." So, the next time somebody asks you, do you really believe the Bible literally? I would hope you could smile and say absolutely. Because, the moment we stop believing that miracles can literally happen is the moment that we stop believing that God is a God of miracles, yesterday, today, and forever. If he was a God of miracles yesterday, he's a God of miracles today. And if he's a God of miracles today, he's a God of miracles forever. And in the moment that we forget that, we basically are giving power to Satan to fight against God. So, for me, this really isn't any longer a question, because I've seen enough of his exceptions to know his laws are real, and I've seen enough of his laws to know his exceptions are divine. And I testify that God is a God of miracles, now just as much as any time in the past. And we are about to witness things that we won't be able to explain unless we understand that the very elements obey God's commands. When these things begin to happen, just know that God is here. And it's definitely an exciting time to be alive. I hope this kind of helps a little bit with understanding at least my view of the Bible, why I believe it's literal. I'd love to hear your comments, whether you think it's literal or not. And especially if you don't think it's literal, I would like to hear you try to explain, some of these things. Anyway, just thank you guys for watching and for the support that I've been getting and getting more and more, which is always nice. And thank God for helping me understand these things, and continuing to inspire me with more ideas and better ways to bring these things to you. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time.